You're not just handing over the reins, but you're still creating a legacy that instills your values to your loved ones.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Build to Billions podcast, where we guide successful entrepreneurs and investors on their journey from millions to billions. We believe the key to scaling and compounding wealth in life starts every single day with the mindset and practice of stewardship over ownership and applying billionaire biblical principles. Our ultimate goal is to help you scale and compound your wealth in life so you can give more all of it away to help MVPs, the most vulnerable people. My name is Brett Swartz, and every episode we're joined by entrepreneurs, millionaires, and billionaires, and they share their story, insights, and wisdom with us so we can all level up all of our investing, all of our different parts of our leadership in our life so we can make a bigger impact. I'm excited about our next guest. He's out of the San Diego area, and he helps and specializes in selling real estate, as well as people who have large capital gains tax challenges. He has lots of experience in 1031 exchanges, specializing in probate and tax efficient strategies, and just selling real estate for his clients. I'm excited to be talking with him today. Please welcome to the show with me, Mr. Scott Stollar. Scott, how are you doing?
Hey, Brett, thank you so much for having me here. It's great to be a guest on this wonderful podcast.
Yep, grateful to have you. We're also streaming on Capital Gains Tax Solutions podcast and YouTube channels as well, in case you're catching us there. So, Scott, let's just dive right into a little bit about your story and your focus. Would you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. So I got started in real estate pretty young. I lost both my parents at a young age, and a realtor took me under his wing at that time, helped me with a lot of the investment properties that he and his family owned, and basically had me doing the handyman stuff where I would go in, turn them, and then after a while it started to be like, hey, we're going to buy a new one. Here's what we're going into. Here's what we're looking at from our perspective of it as an investor, and started just showing with me how you can make that happen. And it really had me figure out how you could take a loss in your life and turn that into something incredible and empowering rather than being guided by that loss and that scarcity.
Wow, what a powerful story, and sorry for your loss. And so it sounds like you had an awesome person jump in and mentor you and jump in to help you to get into real estate and get into the understanding of it all. And so now you focus on helping people sell in the greater San Diego region and area. What's the most rewarding thing when it comes to that for you?
I think really just watching families that are looking at things like maybe they had an investment property that they purchased years ago and there's this huge capital gain, and they're at a new stage in their life and they're wondering, what can we do with this? So there's a lot of really cool things that you could watch people do. I've seen school teachers that started in property ownership as Marines leverage their property to pay for multiple children's college educations and really take that step up. And even with that individual, it wasn't just his own child, it was a community from his church. There were a few children that lost their parents unexpectedly and became orphaned that he and his wife ended up taking under their wing and caring for. And as school teachers, they needed a new way to leverage their real estate so that they could actually do that without the financial strain. So it's so cool to see that. And I love helping people where I was when I had that loss. I was confused, overwhelmed, didn't know what to do. And just giving that clear map of how you can go through that. What do you want to do for your life? Is that holding on to the property, and what does that cost you? Is it selling it? Is selling it even the right thing to do right now? Or do you want to turn it into an investment? And if you do want to turn it into an investment, as in your world, is that actually a viable investment, or is there something better?
Man, I love all of this and how I'm kind of connecting the dots here. I believe we're all best positioned to serve the person we once were. A good mentor of mine said that, Rory Baden. And also, it sounds like you have a heart for helping orphans, right? And so does some of the clients that you're working with as well, make an impact with their wealth. And also just kind of tying it together too. Like it sounds like, hey, you have this big potential loss in this capital gains tax, but what if we could rearrange strategically and not only, defer that tax, right, but let it compound and work to make an impact. Is that a fair summary so far?
Absolutely. And as you're saying, some people don't realize how wealthy they actually are, especially when they own real estate in Southern California.
I think that's so true, right? And they don't realize just the amount of cash flow, passive cash flow they can actually unlock, which is what we're going to talk about here today with Scott. And for those who may or may not know, I'm a California real estate broker by trade and actually spent some time in San Diego in college playing basketball, and then started at Marcus and Millichap selling investment real estate. And all that being said, we've learned some tax deferral strategies beyond the 1031 exchange that we want to share with you today. And this applies to if you're selling a primary home, selling a business, investment real estate, Bitcoin. You have massive capital gains tax. You have at least $1 million gain, $1 million net proceeds. We want to show you how this could be maybe a good fit for you. That being said, Scott, when it comes to helping people sell high-end primary homes or investment real estate, let's just start with the big challenge, right? It's the capital gains tax in San Diego, in California, and then what you've used in the past, and then let's talk about a new, maybe better way for people to exit when they're facing the next exit with you.
Yeah, it blows my mind how many people, especially when they've owned properties for a long time in San Diego County, just to preface, we average a 5.5% year over year return, which over a 30-year span, that's 1.5% higher than the national average. 1.5% doesn't sound huge, but when you're talking about the average price of a home being 1.2 million, that is a huge amount, especially when it compounds year over year. Some of these people have purchased homes for three, four, $500,000, and now they're worth 2.5 million. And the term golden handcuffs, I'm pretty sure was originated in San Diego, just because you have these beautiful homes that have become too big, and empty nesters or people entering their golden years are thinking, I can't take care of this house anymore, but I also don't want to give the government, regardless of who's in the office, $600,000. And it's so crazy how many people that I hear just give up and say, we just want to pay the taxes. We've looked in the past at, should we turn this into a rental property for 2 tax cycles so that you could do a 1031? And the biggest challenge is that they want to do this move now. They don't want to become landlords. They want access to their capital. Some of the CPAs are saying, yes, you can double dip on your 121 exemption, and others are saying, no, don't do it. You're going to get audited the minute you do that. So, and even the ones that don't want to do the investor route, they may even look at the other DST, the Delaware Statutory Trust. And oftentimes when they see those, if they're just not really a business-minded person, let's say, they've never had ownership in investment real estate or a business itself, those 300-page memorandums to do your due diligence on each deal is exhausting and overwhelming.
Yeah, so much, so good. And you said it so well here, right? I think at the end of the day, it sounds like people are looking for transformational exit planning versus just transactional. They're looking for not trading the priceless time for something that's profitable. They're looking to get unstuck from what was the past, right? And harvest and move on somewhere else without incurring the massive capital gains tax. And if we're going to basically in the next, 15, 20 minutes, walk through a solution that we believe can be transformational for you. I'm glad you brought up the traditional, 1031 exchange. The Delaware 1031 exchange basically is what that is. And we're going to contrast that with what's called the Deferred Sales Trust, everybody. And just quick background, thousands of transactions, billions of assets sold using this, close to 30-year track record and about 30 no change audits. And we're going to walk through step by step how this works. And if it sounds really good to you, I want you to contact Scott, who can then look at your house potentially or your investment property to sell, and in conjunction with the strategic alliance with Capital Gains Tax, which is my company, to potentially sell and exit in a way that really gives you back what I like to say, more time, right? Less headaches, and more diversification and freedom with your capital. So Scott, let's dive right into this. So the first thing that I think people need to understand is, number one, when you sell, there's different tax codes that do different things. Like, for example, you're probably familiar with an IRA, or a 401k, right? Or even a 1031 exchange. Those are very common parts of the tax code. Well, there's another part of the tax code called IRC 453, known as an installment sale, right? Whereas Scott, if you are the seller of let's say a San Diego $10 million property in La Jolla, right? And you've owned it for 25 years and you have zero basis, zero debt, and you have this massive gain. You've been renting it out and now it has no basis left. Well, if you were to sell that tomorrow, you're going to pay at least 3.7 million in tax, right? Or even up to 4 million if depreciation recapture. And so this is what we're trying to solve for. However, if you sell it on an installment sale, meaning you become the bank and you lend to the buyer a portion of the sales price, to the extent you loan, you get to report it as an installment sale, and you don't only pay tax as you receive payments on that. So for example, let's say there's George down the street who wants to buy it, and he puts $1 million down payment. And Scott, you carry back $9 million worth of paper, right? You become the bank. In that scenario, you only pay tax on the million, let's call it 370,000, but the other 9 million that you've lent to this person named George, right? That's an installment sale. Now the challenge with that traditionally is, guess what? If George doesn't take care of the property, doesn't pay you on time, you have to foreclose and take the property. It could be less value. So a lot of people don't do that for that reason. So you're not diversified, you're not liquid, you might have to take it back. That's kind of bad news. Instead, we've taken that concept of 453 and we've combined it with a trust. And this is the beauty, Scott, right? Anyone who's listening. And we say, hey, George, come with 10 million, get a bank loan or come with all cash. We're not going to finance you. Instead, we're gonna sell first to this trust, and we'll call it the Point Loma Trust. I went to Point Loma Nazarene University for a year, so play basketball there. So we'll call it the Point Loma Trust, and this trust will buy your position, Scott, for 10 million, and you'll 100% finance the trust, so you have no tax at this point, right? And the trust in the same escrow will sell it to the buyer for 10 million, George, in this scenario. And in this scenario, since the trust, Scott, bought it for 10 million and sold it for 10 million, the trust has no gain. And you receive a promissory note back, let's put an 8 or 9% interest rate on the note. And this is the beauty, the funds can sit at Charles Schwab. And now you have all the flexibility to just take payments back from this trust slowly over time and pay tax. I'm gonna pause there. I know that's a whole lot in about 90 seconds or so, but maybe you can say it back to make sure that you got it so that anyone else listening, making sure that they got it.
Well, one thing that, and forgive me for interjecting here, but I love that you brought it up. And I often hear so many people think that they're going to structure their own deferred sale to mitigate the capital gains. And one of the most common misnomers that I hear is that they're going to become the bank and they're not going to pay their taxes because of that. And you do still have to pay your taxes that way. You're just spreading it out over a longer period of time. And one thing that a lot of people don't realize is that when I hear that, they're trying to exit being a landlord or not interested in being a landlord, but they're effectively still having the same amount of noise as having a rental property, but now they're just being the bank. And like you said, if they have to foreclose it, if they have to call that note due, if they have to do a notice of default, that's all on them at that point. And there's some cool things that they can do for the buyer, but it's not as quiet as some people may think. It's really noisy.
100%. It's more transactional based upon the tax versus transformational and based upon the freedom, right? And so this is the key. These funds, instead of being collateralized against the property that you just sold, which is not diversified, and the buyer is probably not investment grade. Instead, the trust funds can be invested in the biggest companies in the world: Home Depot, Apple, Google, whatever you choose, right? Facebook, Tesla, NVIDIA. You can put it into Bitcoin to defer some. You can put it into real estate, passive real estate, industrial properties, or mobile home parks, or real estate debt, which has actually been pretty higher returns lately. The point is, you can diversify versus being just in one solo asset, and you never have to, fear having to take that asset back. And so, yeah, that's the key. It's deferral, but it's the flexibility to also be an entrepreneur. You might want to go buy another real estate property. You can, as long as it's an investment real estate property. And we can work with financial advisors to invest the funds. But a lot of our real estate clients like to put into passive real estate, right, Scott, at optimal timing. There's no timing constraints to this. And so again, if you're facing a massive capital gains tax on the sale of your real estate, business Bitcoin, you can use this strategy to defer that tax and invest it into any asset class at any time. And we want to continue to walk through some scenarios with you right now. Scott, let's do the primary home seller, right? Because you mentioned the 121 exclusion. Why don't you walk through what that is, right? And then some of the limitations there. And then we will walk through how our strategy can work for the luxury homeowner who owns a big property in Ocean Beach and has this massive capital gains tax, but only doesn't want to rent it out, obviously, and doesn't want to do a 1031 exchange for all the reasons we talked about. Let's walk them through how our strategy can help them right now.
Yeah, that's perfect that you bring that up. And the 121 exemption is the one that everyone's heard of, or most people have, where if you sell your primary and you're a single filer, you can exempt up to $250,000 of that capital gain tax-free. And if you're a married couple filing jointly, that jumps up to $500,000. The challenge is that some of these people, like I mentioned before, that purchased a home for $1 million and now it's worth 8 million, that 500 doesn't get you anywhere. It doesn't really help you out. And that's where you may have heard locally some of the people complaining, wishing that that exemption was a little bit higher, because these people want to move. And, life happens. Things come up. Kids move out of homes. Maybe you want something that doesn't require as much maintenance. You want something single level because your knees begin to hurt, or you want something closer to the country club to hang out with your friends more. And not being able to do that and being limited to that $250,000 or $500,000 amount really locks you in.
100%. So so again, just to quickly on that, it's if you live there 2 of the last 5 years, this is your primary residence, it's $500,000 tax free. Another way to think about it, like let's say you bought it for $1 million, it's worth $10 million. A simple way to think about it, just your basis is no longer $1 million, it's now $1.5 million if you're married, and then it's $1.25 if you're single, right? That's just your basis, so that you can determine your gain there. So that's just a little bit of some math. But the point is, the rest of it's capital gains tax, and also it doesn't qualify for a 1031 exchange because it's a primary home.
It's your primary.
And a primary home cannot be a 1031 exchange. Now, our strategy, because it's not a 1031 exchange, works for a primary home. In fact, we did it for an $8 million luxury home in Palo Alto. The gentleman had 6 kids, all of them out of the house. All of his net worth, a lot of it was tied into this house. He had a huge gain, and he wanted to sell and defer the tax, right? And so it helped him to save, or to defer the tax, but also save the deal from going through, because otherwise, after closing costs and debt, he would have just basically had nothing at the close. And with tax. And so you were able to defer all that. So we can do that for you if you're the homeowner by simply setting up a trust, having your buyer cooperate, working with Scott as the real estate agent to sell the house. And all of us together as a team can structure it where at closing, you get a promissory note for whatever the net proceeds are. And then it slowly pays you back over time. But the beauty is you don't have to do like-kind replacement requirement. You don't have to do 45-day 180. You don't have to move out for 2 years and then start to be a landlord. You never have to be a landlord. You can be completely passive. Now, here's one of the caveats. We can't, whatever we use for a primary home purchase, like let's say you want to buy a small condo or you want to buy something else, that's not tax deferrable. So if you sell a $10 million asset, now if you only need like $1 million or $2 million of the down payment for the next one, that's fine. Then we'll make the note for $8 million or whatever, right? So you can do combinations. You just can't defer it into a primary. Same reason you can't defer a 1031 into a primary home. And so these are just some of the things that we can do some planning for, but it works for primary home sellers who really want an opportunity to unlock that capital and then get passive cash flow, which can change their life. We call it truly passive cash flow or truly passive income. And we believe it's to your freedom and impact as compounding interest is to your money, whether it be $10, $20, $30, $40, $50,000 per month. You unlock that capital without having to suffer the consequences of all the taxes in 1 year, and you let this trust pay you back over time, and you let it compound. Now, most of our sellers, Scott, they won't dip into principal, meaning they'll keep the full amount of principal there, and they'll just live off the cash flow, and that cash flow is obtained through investments that they approve. Now, they work with a third-party trustee, that's our company, and basically we form a team to execute this at a very precise, customized way for you, the seller. And so, what questions, Scott, do you think maybe people might have that I could try to answer at this point, and then we could kind of keep moving towards some frequently asked questions as well.
Yeah, I think the first one that's going to be foremost in people's minds is, let's say that you need $1 million for the down payment, like you explained. That is going to have some tax implications with pulling that money out. And then
Correct.
also, just could you highlight for folks how they could use that passive income to actually qualify for new debt and even wrap Prop 19 if you're old enough or in the correct situation to carry your property tax basis over, so it's a nice, cute little bundle that's actually advantageous to homeowners.
Yeah, this is a great point. So exactly, we'll start with the first one, right? So yeah, to the extent you need or want a percentage of the sales price, the proceeds to purchase your next primary home, no problem. It's going to be taxable. So in this scenario, let's say you had a $10 million asset. Let's say you bought it for 500,000, 25 years ago, or it's worth 10 million. It's in La Jolla, right? And you're married, so we'll move the 500,000 up to $1 million. So now you have about $1 million basis. So you have about a $9 million gain. And so we'll do the math on 9 million. We're going to use 33%, which is about $3 million of tax. Okay. So if we put all of the proceeds into the trust, you're going to defer all 3 million of tax, right? Imagine you have no debt, to keep it really simple here. However, you say, you know what, Scott, I need to go buy another place. Makes sense. I only need about $1 million, or whatever it is, 2, 3, 4 million, whatever you need, you can take. You can schedule a payment from the trust after you close escrow to pay you, and then you just prepare to pay tax on that. But let's just say you need $1 million in this scenario. So we close, 10 million goes into the trust, minus the closing costs for like paying Scott for as a commission and such. And then the one-time legal cost, which we'll cover right now, it's about 1.5% of the gross sales price on the first million, 1.25 on anything above that. It's a one-time legal fee for my business partner. The rest of it goes into the trust, and we can schedule $1 million out to you right away, which you can use for the down payment. Now, Scott says, well, maybe you also need some income to qualify for, maybe say you're buying a $3 million property, so you need some more income to qualify for the rest of the $2 million loan on the next purchase. Well, first thing is we don't have to, there's no timing constraints. And so Scott and you guys can go shopping and waiting and looking for the property. There's no like rush to do this. And so what that means is we can have the trust be invested. In this scenario, there'll be about 9 million in the trust, after it paid you the million. And that 9 million, let's just say we invest it, and we're making about 9%. About $810,000, right? It can pay you some or all of that. We like to wait a couple months to get the income and get everything invested to get, I call it the plane up and running and at a good altitude, producing the cash flow. But let's just say you need $500,000 of income to qualify for that, $2 million loan, right? Great. Well, we can start having it pay you. Let's divide that by 12, 41,000 a month, starting in about, month 3 or 4, right? So you might have a window where you're waiting. You can also have it pay you right away, by the way. It just means we're having to dip into some of the principal right away, which typically people don't like to do, but it's totally up to you. It's your money, right? But the point is, that is income that's coming in that you can show to a bank, right? You can show them the promissory note, and they can see the cash flow flowing into your bank account, which can quickly qualify you for your income ratio to qualify for the loan, right? And so it's like each piece at a time. Number 1, sell. Number 2, put the money in the trust. Number 3, amount goes out for down payment for you. Number 4, invest the funds to get the cash flow going. And this becomes a nice way to get some passive income as well as still have your primary home. I think I answered the questions. You might have had one more that I might not have answered, but any questions on that, Scott?
No, I think that was great. And one thing to point out too, and that you can elaborate on as well, and you started to touch on there, was when you're using trust funds to qualify for a loan for a new property, it's actually a lot easier. And then even some of the brokers for the loan on the next primary will let you defer that first payment. For me, usually the first payment's not due for 45, 60 days to begin with anyways after closing. So that buys you a month and a half, 2 months right there. If you need to push back that extra month, most of them will let you pay a point or a fee to push that back through closing on the buy side.
Yeah, I think the key here is hire the team, right? Hire the who, don't be the how. Like hire and work with us to plan everything out so that we get everything in order, so that you're not caught by any surprises. You can start right now by going to sellitscott.com, sellitscott.com. Mention that you saw Scott on this podcast, and we can get started today to start to build this out. Excellent. I want to mention one other thing, kind of a frequently asked question. Some people say, well, do I lose my 121 exclusion? Can I just take that 500,000 out and just, give it tax free at closing? Now, pros and cons of this. Number one, start with the con. So the con is you can't just take it out at closing. I mean, you can, but it's in proportion to what you receive, that you receive back the 121 exclusion. So for example, you don't lose the 121 exclusion. However, you only get the benefit as you take it in proportion to the percentage of the proceeds. So for example, if the proceeds were $10 million and your 121 exclusion is 500,000, well, if you take all 10 million all in 1 year, you're getting 100% of the benefit of that 500,000. But if I'm only taking 10% as an example, I'm only really getting about 10% of that benefit. Okay, so it's in proportion to your basis and the exclusion. So in other words, it's kind of like, well, you're like, well, if I don't take anything, do I lose it? No, it's just going to be deferred out until the moment that you do take it. Now, the reality is most of our clients don't like to dip into principal. They like just to live off the interest. They can pass these notes on to their children. The note is what becomes the asset inside of their living trust. And their children can step into their shoes. They can continue the tax deferral, and they only pay tax as they receive payments from the trust. Again, they become the bank, so it's like a 1099 INT is what they receive. Unless they dip into principal, then it's capital gains tax. And so it's just kind of a little bit of a shift from owner to a lender, but it's really simple to report with your CPA, which is kind of the leads to the next questions. Your CPA is going to have questions, which is totally fine. Invite them to the call with us. We work on a conditional basis where we'll educate them on what we're doing, how we're doing it. Any questions they have, we'll show them how to report it properly. In fact, the creator of this is a tax attorney and a CPA. He's the genius behind all of this, and he's my business partner. And so that's really important to understand, that you have this legal representation and a CPA who's created this to help educate your CPA. Second most important thing, or maybe it's the first most important thing, but something to mention here, lifetime audit defense. So should the audit come, and by the way, we've had most of our audits in California. Actually, the biggest deal was done in San Diego, over $100 million deal in San Diego. The audit was no change, no findings, just like every one of our audits. So we're batting 1,000 there. And so we have zero issues. It's 100% legal, but it is highly specialized, and we got to, make sure we do everything in the right order. That's part of where our company comes in here as a trustee to help with this compliance and building it all out. Quickly, I'll cover the other fees people I have, Scott. So the fees to the trustee with the financial advisor, typically about 1.5% to 2% on the AUM. So whatever is the net proceeds into the trust. So for every million, it's about 15 to 20,000 on a recurring basis. And we typically cash flow those fees, meaning we're investing and earning before we're collecting. And so that's the general framework there. And lastly, we work on a conditional basis. And so we promise to never talk you into anything that's not a good fit. If we, we'll be the first to tell you it's not a great fit. And if you feel like it's not a good fit, just let us know. There's no there's no hard feelings, and just let us know, and we're good there. So, but a lot of people, it transforms their lives. We have a whole YouTube channel on this that breaks it down. We also have a book called Building a Capital Gains Tax Exit Plan that you can pick up. We have Kevin Harrington from Shark Tank in the book, and also Tony Robbins, CPA, in the book, which is pretty cool. And it breaks down the entire story of basically me learning about this and discovering it for my clients and the transformation it's had for my clients. So real client stories in this. Scott, any last things you can pick that up by going to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com or going to Amazon and looking up Building a Capital Gains Tax Exit Plan. Scott, any last questions or thoughts before we wrap it up?
I think this is also a great one for those families that maybe the kids were trying to help out their parents and they got on title before mom and dad died, and they ended up losing their step up in basis because of that. This could be a great thing for them. And then also on the estate planning side, let's say that we all know those families where there's multiple children, multiple people that stand to inherit something, and they don't all see eye to eye, to put it nicely.
Yeah, let's walk through that. So if and what Scott was referring to, if you transferred your real estate to your children while you're still alive, unfortunately, that's a mistake. If you wanted to have a stepped up basis, you forfeit that while you're still alive. And so it's kind of a catch-22. You're trying to do some estate planning because, the house is, like everything Scott said before, the toilets are trash, the termites or whatever, or the real estate, whatever it is, you're just like, you know what, better just give it over to them. And I can kind of go off into the sunset and we don't have to incur the tax right away. But the challenge is then you lose the stepped up basis. And so we can solve that for you. I mean, your son or daughter can sell. We can still defer the tax, right? We can't give you back the stepped up basis, but we can still solve the tax. So we have that. So we can solve that for, if you're listening to this, it's a great way to do that. We can also help with estate planning. Like Scott said, you might own assets, you have assets, but you have multiple kids and it's kind of confusing. One kid wants to be in the business. One kid wants to live in the house. One kid doesn't really care. And one kid is somewhere in the middle. And you're like, I can't please every kid. You're like, yeah, you're right. Yeah. So what you can do is sell while you're still alive, defer all the tax, and then the promissory note payments can be split, however you'd like, 25% each to each, if you have 4 kids as an example. And it totally simplifies your estate plan. And this is beautiful, right? So you don't have to worry about kids making decisions or even the timing of the market, right? If you think it's
or
a good
going
time
off to buy Ferraris.
Yeah, going off to buy Ferraris and just taking all the money tax-free because they got a stepped up basis. Like, do you really want that? You can do all of the estate planning within your living trust to state that this promissory note is to be invested and the interest is to be used with the parameters that you set up. So it's a great way to help you steward the capital and put in boundaries for your kids. It's amazing, right? It's a really seamless way to kind of like close that chapter, get everything seamlessly passed without having to hand over the reins of all of the real estate management or the sales aspect of it.
And I think that's a great point. Like, you're not just handing over the reins, but you're still creating a legacy that instills your values to your loved ones.
100%. The last one I'll leave with people is you say, well, Brett, I'm an investor. Scott, I work with Scott. He's going to help me do my 1031 exchange. I kind of want to go shopping. Perfect. We love that. In fact, we have our best 1031 exit plan, which gives you the ability to go shopping with the 1031 with Scott. And if you don't find it out, we have a backup plan to save it. So let's walk through that scenario. Let's say you have a $15 million apartment complex in Point Loma. You're selling it and you find a perfect $8 million deal in Ocean Beach, right? Or Pacific Beach. You're like, oh, this is perfect, but I have an extra boot of $7 million left over. Beautiful. We can do $7 million into the Deferred Sales Trust and $8 million can buy your property. Perfect, right? So you can do a combination, or let's say you did find that perfect deal in Pacific Beach for $15 million, right? And you're like, awesome. And then last minute, the deal blows up, right? The seller won't deal or whatever. You decide you don't want it. We can be a parachute to save that failed 1031 or that failing 1031 exchange. If you work with us and get everything lined up with the QI company that we have strategically aligned, really important that you're working with experts that have all of the proper language in these contracts. So you don't have to be in one or the other, and we can save a 1031 exchange. And so it's really, really unique proposition for you who's listening. Scott, we're way out of time. Are you ready to encourage people where to go should they want to find you? Where can they find you, Scott?
Yeah, absolutely. You could go to my website, as Brett said, sellitscott.com. You can email me, sellitscott@kw.com, or you could even text me, 760-697-5661. If you're catching this on the podcast, that's my direct number. You're not going to get an assistant or anything like that. Straight line to me. We can get things figured out for you so you can make the best decision for you and your family.
Awesome. Scott Stollar, thank you so much for being on the show, sharing your story, your heart for helping people make an impact and a legacy with their wealth through selling their properties, deferring capital gains taxes. He is Scott Stollar. I am Brett Swartz. Thank you so much for listening. We'll talk to you all hopefully real soon. Bye now.